All right, everyone, welcome to World War II. The war begins. After the treaty or the non-aggression pact with the Soviets, Germany was available to basically attack Poland and basically not worry about the Russians going to war against them. Obviously, they're going to split Poland in half. That was a secret no one knew about. So World War II officially will begin on September 1st, 1939, because Hitler will order the invasion of Poland. What happened is early that morning, some German soldiers, got the idea from Japan, I guess, dressed up like Polish soldiers and blew up a radio station, the tower, the transmitting tower of a radio station right on the German-Polish border. It was a German station. And of course, that morning, Hitler makes a speech on the radio saying the Polish army had blown up their radio station, and now he has to take steps to protect the integrity of the German people. And just by chance, luckily, his entire military machine was right there on the Polish border, already mobilized, ready for war, so he gave permission for the invasion of Poland. And that is when World War II begins, because, of course, France and Britain now have discovered that Hitler cannot be appeased. The more they appease him, the more the more you give, the more he wants. So on September 3rd, then of course they'll declare war on Germany, setting everything in motion. But when the Germans invaded Poland, they unleashed on the world a new kind of warfare. The kind of warfare is called blitzkrieg. Okay, blitzkrieg translates into roughly lightning warfare that moves as fast as lightning. Basically, you use your Air Force to destroy all of the communications towers and everything else that your opposing army will use to communicate with the soldiers in the front. Then you have your mechanized divisions and your tank divisions. They smash through the enemy's lines and they keep going. They don't stay here and continue to fight where the enemy's front lines are. They just smash through and keep going as far and as fast as they can into the back. They leave all these people here because behind them are the infantry soldiers who are going to stay here and keep these people, fighting, machine gun hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that, while your tanks and trucks loaded with other infantry soldiers move to the back. And basically they do a pincher movement. The pincher, think of like the pincher, the claw of a lobster, where they close the claw. And basically when the pinchers close, all of the soldiers are now surrounded and trapped, encircled by, in this case, the German army, and they have no access to reinforcements or supplies. And literally in 2 weeks, Poland will surrender. Basically, another reason they surrendered so quickly is 2 weeks after the German invasion over here, and of course all the Polish military is being directed on this side of their country, suddenly a million soldiers from the Soviet Union pour into the back of Poland and invade. And of course, Poland easily collapsed after that. And then basically the line is drawn that had been agreed upon from Russia and Germany to divide Poland into two halves. And the Germans move into to Warsaw, the capital. Japan, noticing all of this happening successfully for Germany, decides to join the Rome-Berlin axis. Remember that Germany, Hitler and Mussolini had signed a treaty to protect each other. So Japan wanted it on that. And so suddenly the Rome-Berlin axis now becomes Berlin-Tokyo axis. And these will be the three main powers of the Axis powers of World War II, which will be fought between the Axis powers and, of course, the Allied powers, which will be France, Britain, and their allies, and later on, of course, the United States will also join that side. Now, keep this in mind. Hitler's responsible for causing World War II, but after he conquered France, he actually stopped for a while. Stalin, on the other hand, continued on the warpath, and he demanded a bunch of land from Finland, of course, which Finn said no, so he invaded the Finns. Oops, what happened? He invaded Finland and caused the Finns to finally have to capitulate after he sent in a huge million-man army and took the land that he had insisted from Finland, which is mainly this area right here, and this was resource-rich land up here for him that he wanted. Now, of course, Germany has to concentrate on England and France. Now, of course, luckily for England, they're an island, so they're going to be hard to get to. But France, of course, is Germany's neighbor. But the problem is, before Germany could start the war and conquer France, as Hitler had plans to do, they get all of their iron ore from Sweden through this channel right here. So he needed to close off the Baltic Sea access so that the British Navy could not blockade Germany like they did during World War I. And he needed access to those for steel. So he had to control the entrance to the Baltic Sea. Thus, he had to conquer Denmark and Norway. And that's exactly what he does. His armies invade Denmark here, and then his airborne forces paratroop into Norway and conquer Norway, which is what you can see here, the plan of conquering Norway and his airborne troops landing by the thousands. Now, to keep the British Navy at bay and to keep the British away from Europe, the Battle of Atlantic begins. Now, the Battle of Atlantic is actually the longest battle of the war. It actually took place for about, almost 3 full years. Basically, the Battle of Atlantic is the Germans' use of their submarines, which are far more advanced than they were in World War I, to blockade Britain and sink all of their food and resources that are coming from their colonies to feed the Brits and the British factories for their war machine. And actually, to be truthful, Winston Churchill, who now became the new Prime Minister of England after Neville Chamberlain resigned from office in shame because of his policy of appeasement being such a failure, Hitler actually confessed at the end of the war that the only thing that really ever frightened him during the entire war, and Britain came really close to losing, was the threat from the submarines. They did an excellent job, especially in the first 18 months to 2 years, sinking so much of the British shipping that she was starving, quite dangerously close to being defeated. This is kind of the map of the Atlantic Ocean and how the German submarines stationed themselves in what were called wolf packs, sometimes with 20 to 30 submarines patrolling in one area. And what they would do is if one submarine would identify an Allied convoy of supplies coming across the Atlantic, they would start to follow it, secretly, and they would radio to everyone the number of ships and the direction and speed that the convoy was going, and they would just patiently wait until the rest of the wolf pack shows up and they ambush the convoy. And they were very effective at sinking hundreds and hundreds of ships. And that kept Britain off the map for a while. So now he can deal with France. But the problem that Germany had with France is right here. This is the border, Alsace-Lorraine, and your Rhineland is here. This is the border of France, and the French spent millions and millions and millions, probably in today's money, billions of dollars, to build this really heavily fortified defensive line here called the Maginot Line. And honestly, it was so masterfully built and so powerful that there was no way any German army who tried to invade France through the Maginot Line would be wiped out. Let me give you an idea of what the Maginot Line looks like. This is the underground picture of it. You see they have all of these turrets and heavy cannons and machine guns above the ground, and then the entire armies and fortresses are beneath the ground, and they even have trains that transfer people from one end of the line to the next so they can move armies, massive numbers of soldiers really quickly. And these soldiers can live under here indefinitely. They even have sun, we call it UV, ultraviolet tanning booths and stuff like that, so they can get the vitamin E or whatever the vitamin is you get from the sun. So this was something that was not going to be passable for the German army. So that means he has to come up with a different plan. What is the way to get through the Maginot Line, which you can't? Well, of course, he knows that the Schlieffen Plan from World War I, which almost succeeded, was the German invasion through Belgium to get to Paris this way and bypass all the French armies over here. And he knows, I'm sorry, not Hitler, his generals know that the Allies, the British and the French armies who are here are expecting that. But here's the secret. This here, right here, is an area that's called the Ardennes Forest. It's really heavily forested trees. And basically, the German army, no one believes an army, especially tanks, can pass through this too densely thick forest. Well, that's exactly what their plan was. So basically, when the invasion begins, There's a fake invasion through Belgium, which brings the British and the French armies up north into Belgium to stop what they believe is the main invasion. But then the secret invasion, now here's your Maginot Line here. The secret invasion are these armies right here. They come smashing through the Ardennes forest, and they come out around the back of these soldiers as they're moving north. And then what you have is, here's the armies moving north. You have the main invasion force here. You have the dummy invasion force here, and they get trapped. And ultimately, when they turn on these armies, they're forced back into this little pocket known as Dunkirk. That's the name of the little town here. There's actually the movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a pretty neat movie about the evacuation, because that's exactly what happened. When they were trapped there, the French and British armies, well, actually they had protection by the British Air Force flying over them to attack anybody who was trying to get onto the beaches to kill the soldiers. And for basically 9 days, every kind of ship you can imagine in England, which was, 20 miles away, that floated actually, would come across the English Channel at night and load up as many soldiers, British and French soldiers, as they could, and sneak them back to England. And after 9 days, over 300,000 soldiers, both British and French, you can see here, were rescued. Now, the reason this is so important is that had these soldiers all been captured at Dunkirk, there would not have been an army left for the British and the French to use when they go on the offensive to begin fighting Germany again. This is the army right here that they'll use when the battles begin again, when the Allies invade North Africa, which we'll talk about later. Here are some pictures. And of course, with their army defeated and evacuated, France has to surrender to the Germans. You see here is a picture of Hitler standing in front of that for power. He's so happy. Now, what he does so that he can control all of the French colonies in Africa, he occupies the important part of France, but then he leaves this part to become a new country called Vichy France, because of the Vichy being their capital city. And he appoints Henry Pétain, Marshal Pétain, as the new leader of Vichy France, which is a puppet of Hitler in charge of this part of France. But this people here, this French government, still has control over the French colonies of Africa. So through Marshal Pétain, Hitler can control those French colonies, because had he overthrown the entire country of France, those colonies would have just joined over to their British neighbors and served to fight against Germany. It was a pretty brilliant idea what he came up with to do that. And these are the colonies I was talking about. All of this in yellow were controlled by Germany through Vichy France. He was able to control that part of Africa. The French, of course, are famous for always putting up resistance. And of course, I'll end this part of the PowerPoint by showing you what Europe now looks like for the Axis and Allies. Well, the Allies are basically only Britain right now, but through direct conquest or through treaties and indirect control, you can see everything in blue, even here now, because of the Vichy French control. All of this now belongs to Germany and his allies, especially Italy. Japan's over in the other part of the world. And that's where I'll leave you for this one. And on the next PowerPoint, we will begin talking about the rest of the first 2 years of the war. See you soon.